What's happening, folks? Geologist Philip Prince, back with Chimney Rock here. I already did a video about this location, but it's one that has remained at the forefront of discussion post Helene, largely because it is a location that looks very much different. And Google Earth will now actually show you that. New imagery came out, I think, just today. It looks like they collected it on November 15th. But it's a really interesting way to look at what happened in Chimney Rock in terms of where the Rocky Broad River essentially moved as a result of the flood. And it also shows you at this point what people are doing to try to put the river back where it started. What I want to talk about in this video is why the river moved, what that means geologically, and sort of what you would expect from a river in a location like this, because certain details of the Hickory Nut Gorge, where Chimney Rock is located, are such that a wandering river, if you want to call it that, particularly in big floods, is something that you would expect. And I don't know, as you probably notice, I have followed what's gone on with this event pretty closely, and I try to monitor whenever any new imagery comes out. Stay on Google Earth a lot, trying to see if they're going to drop some new stuff. Finally happened. They have a little bit around Asheville. They have some up on the Cane River as well. But Chimney Rock here is particularly interesting because you can actually see where people have in effect moved the Rocky Broad River into a new place with respect to where it was after the flood. So the lines I've just drawn there show you where the river is now, as of late November. Right after the flood, the river was in a very different position. It was all the way over right at the base here of that little red roofed building. So the river channel immediately after the Helene flood would have looked something like what you see there. And in a moment, we'll take a look at some of the NOAA imagery that actually shows the river in that position right after that. So already, people have come in here and they have quite literally moved the river from where it ended up after the flood into a new location. That takes a lot of energy. The river uses a lot of water and gravity to do that. People use diesel fuel put into excavators and dump trucks, and the result is the same. You move material, and you end up changing the actual appearance of the landscape. It's interesting to see this as a geologist, because when you're working with geology, you're trying to understand the natural causes for behavior in a certain location. And in a place like this, the river very much wants to wander onto that outside bend there at the foot of the red roof building, because that, in a sense, sort of matches nicely a bend upstream that is sort of like the partner to that one, right? So you coming up here in the upper left of the screen, you got a bend right there, flowing in the direction the hand is moving, and then that bend is matched by one that comes out here towards the red roof building. So where the river ended up there at the end of the flood, that's where it wanted to be. And this is a this is a pretty significant change to push it back in this direction. Now that will allow a lot of rebuilding, but at the same time, that's probably an arrangement that people are going to have to fight with down the road, because among other things, that imposes kind of an unusual sort of bend shape on the river in that particular location. Now, Google Earth has good imagery. The NOAA imagery, NOAA NOAA, that came out right after the storm, looking at October 7th imagery now, it's even better than what you have with Google Earth, but you don't see those kind of, if you want to call it, repair changes that have happened actually since the event. Now, we're looking to the same area, straight down on it. There's that red roof building. You can see the Rocky Broad is literally right at the foot of it. The flood here cut off the road. This is where a bunch of water was actually coming down sort of the main street there in Chimney Rock. You can actually see remnants here of the bridge that went over to the state park. And what's very interesting is I think this is the beginning of construction of that what you would call a new river channel that people have made to move the river away from where it went as a result of the flood. Underneath the ground, or what what was sort of like forested ground here, if we put the pre-flood imagery back on the map here, A lot of trees there that, of course, are no longer present. But underneath all that, really under the entirety of the river gorge here, there is rock, as you might expect, and you can take a geologist's word for it that's a lot of rock. But there is a particular detail to it. It's not bedrock. It's all free, free moving boulders, cobbles, little pieces of gravel, sand. It is sediment. It has already broken away from bedrock, like you would see on the cliffs further up on the walls of the gorge. Cliffs are really easy to see. They look really cool from Chimney Rock. You can see them kind of like uh, tilting down to the southeast, down towards Lake Lure. Those are sources of some of this sediment that makes its way down to the river. The river picks up pieces of rock where it flows over bedrock further upstream. And sort of the geologic function of the river is to carry all that material downstream and ultimately down into bigger rivers. Now, it doesn't get to do that anymore because it ends up in Lake Lure. And just kind of as an aside, looking at the debris pile here in Lake Lure with this NOAA imagery, the debris pile has been cleaned up to a huge extent. Looking at this after that's incredible. I mean, I don't know. I'm certain we have never seen anything, of course, like this happen in our lifetimes, and it's actually worth a look on this website just to see what this looks like because you get an absolutely exceptional level of detail when you zoom in and you can actually see, individual trees, boats, pieces of lumber from, from buildings, whatever, everything that ended up in there. In addition to that debris pile, there's a huge amount of sediment in the lake that was not there before. And all of that finer sediment that actually made it to the lake, that's undergoing the same journey as these big boulders upstream. So in terms of what you would expect from a river like this that is flowing on these loose pieces of rock, be they huge boulders or smaller cobbles or gravel, uh, you would expect the course of the river to have to wander around a bit. And the bend we're looking at here is a pretty good example of that. Take it back to the pre-flood imagery. I've got the road here kind of coming around a bend. There's after the flood. What happened here? Well, the bend in the river just sort of wandered a little bit, stretched out to honestly where it might have been. Actually, before the event, some amount of this road was probably built on an embankment on fill material that was brought in. But suffice it to say, the river just kind of let its course kind of drift around a little bit to pick up some of that rock and take it further downstream because that's the geologic function of the river. In this particular case, when a river is not at all restrained by bedrock, it has much more license to sort of move around, and carry these big fragments of rock along with it. It's a progressive process, but you would almost want to think of this river as like a conveyor belt for rock that is making its way down this gorge. And in order to move all of the rock that accumulates down in here, the river is going to have to it's going to have to shift its course a little bit over time. That is something that goes pretty well with a diagram. So I'll take it over to Microsoft Paint now. Sort of draw up what these changes would look like, give you a sense of the context of this gorge within the greater landscape. Of course, you have these really famous cliffs, Chimney Rock down here on the south side of the gorge. These cliffs are just one of the sediment sources for the gorge. It's picking up a lot from where the river is actually cutting into the rock further upstream. And again, its function over time is to take that downstream. So we'll try to illustrate what that looks like, and then come back to the maps here and look at a few more of the finer details. So hang on just a minute. Okay, so we're going to set ourselves up here with sort of a little schematic of a Rocky Broad Hickory Nut Gorge type of a location. And the good thing about doing this here, paint sketches, it will be possible to change it up a little bit to give you a sense of how the system might kind of evolve over time. So first and foremost, we'll get ourselves the gorge marked out here, and try to give you enough detail that a lot of places involved in this story are going to be visible here. So we're drawing in the Reedy Patch Creek Gorge that comes in along 64 from Edneyville. Right now, we got the upper parts of the gorge up towards Girton, and there's a variety of little stream channels that go up into those mountains on the north side of where the actual Broad River comes in along Highway 9. So we get our other gorge wall here, kind of set ourselves up. Little stream coming in there. Need to be sure my gorge is kind of close enough down there. All right, very good. Got left now is kind of a rumbling bald type of feature here for the escarpment steps way out. Okay, that should be good enough. Kind of got that pirate treasure map landscape sort of look to it here. And we're going to add a couple of these really impressive bedrock cliffs. And what I'm drawing right now is actually where Chimney Rock State Park is located. And if you go far enough upstream here, this bedrock is actually going to be intersecting with the stream valley itself. So up towards in the direction of Girton at least, and actually over in the Broad River along 9, as well as to a great degree in Reedy Patch Creek. The streams there are they're actually flowing across bedrock and cutting into that bedrock and picking up pieces of that bedrock over geologic time and taking them downstream. So let's add in some streams here. Okay. So Broad River coming in. And got a tributary, and this is sort of the main Reedy Patch Creek. That's going to come in right there at Bat Cave, just a little bit below where the Broad River comes in. And give ourselves also this kind of Pools Creek. So where would Lake Lure be here? We'll go ahead and quickly draw it in. You're looking something like that, where you'd have this kind of upper arm of the lake coming up into the gorge. I'm actually not going to show Lake Lure here, just because we're talking about the geologic background, and it is, of course, a man-made feature. I'm gonna add myself another cliff or two here over in the Rumbling Bald area. Okay, so got ourselves a nice landscape set up here, and we've got a lot of rock exposed on these steep gorge walls. And we also have places upstream here where the streams are actually flowing over bedrock. Those picking up rocks. It's a tremendous source of sediment in the form of broken up, sort of loose pieces of rock to make their way down into the Hickory Nut Gorge and be carried along by the river, ultimately as far downstream as you can go, which is the ocean. That's a long way from here, but that's how you have to think about this. This is a sediment transport machine, right? So what is that function actually going to look like? Let's add ourselves a bunch of boulders down here at the bottom of the gorge. Now, some of these have fallen off of the cliffs in rockfall events, and some of these again have been picked up by the river as it is actually carving its way down into the rock. But we're going to totally fill the gorge up with all these little dots and spots to represent boulders, cobbles, gravel, things like that. Okay, on top of that, got material that comes down in the form of debris flows, just like we saw in great number in this area with the Helene event, really at all parts of this river system. That brings a lot of big pieces of rock along with finer sediment with it. And at the end of the day, with the steep topography here, there are a lot of ways to get pieces of rock down into this river system. What's this river going to do over time to be able to transport this material away? Kind of zoom in here and give ourselves a little bit more of a detailed look. So let's have a big flood come along here. Okay. So big flood's gonna make the river stretch some of its bends a little bit. It might encourage it to meander a little bit differently, and that's going to bring it into contact with some new areas in which this sediment has accumulated. And let's say we have another big flood or sort of sequence of floods, and that's going to make the course kind of shift around a little bit more. And at this point, we can actually kind of clean up some of those previously affected areas to represent the fact that they have had some material kind of cleaned out of them by these higher flows. Okay, so the river has done a pretty decent job here of carrying some material away, sort of cleaning up the gorge, taking that waste material, if you want to call it that, the products of erosion, and taking it downstream and out of the system. Well, let's have another big cycle of floods here. Okay, so we get something like this, maybe something like that time around. So come in and we'll clean that area up right there. Ooh, man, got to pay attention here. I'm going to clean up the wrong meander loops. Okay, there we go. So every time this happens, the river's just coming into contact with some new material, and we can run this forward a few more times and get the overall effect of just kind of a cleanup down here in the landscape through which material that had collected in the gorge there from all of the sediment sources along the edges of the gorge is getting sort of tidied up and carried away. Totally lost my place there, but that'll be fine. Okay, so the reason that the course of the river is a little bit less fixed here again is the fact that it is not confined by bedrock in the way that it is upstream. And the overall function of the river system here over the long term in the geologic sense is going to be to be sort of blasting all of this sediment kind of out of this gorge and onto the Piedmont. Now, it doesn't send it out like a fan type of structure that you might see in the desert. It keeps it in rivers, and the rivers get bigger as you move downstream. They don't have as much gradient, but they have a lot more water, and that gives them their transport capacity. So, in terms of the big picture, the Hickory Nut Gorge is sort of the path for pieces of the mountains that have broken down to get carried out of the mountains. And the mountains as you see them today in this part of the Blue Ridge Escarpment, I mean, they're a product of erosion, and this overall system where material breaks apart, produces sediment that ends up in the river, and the river has these big flood events that move it. That's just how it works. That's the natural evolution of this landscape. The river didn't do anything strange or unexpected as a result of this flood. It had pretty big impacts on areas that had been modified by people to be a bit more livable. But seeing the river just kind of do what it's meant to do and take what had been sort of a straightened channel in many locations and restore a little bit more curvature to allow it to access sediment in new areas is very much a natural behavior. So when you think of it that way, you would want to bear that in mind going forward in a place like this. But at the same time, how often do we see an event like this in the Appalachians? And that's a question that we don't even really know the answer to at this point. But needless to say, that question should be on people's minds. It is on people's minds. And as we go forward from this event in this gorge, in landscapes throughout the Appalachians that were affected, it's going to be important to try to strike a balance between natural tendencies of the system, what we can do to make it more tailored to human needs, and sort of the overlap between those two characteristics or needs of the landscape. So we'll hop back to the maps now. Okay, so that's the big idea here. When you look down on this river, yes, it carries water, but really one of its major geologic functions is to move material. It's to take pieces of the mountains and carry them out to lower elevation, break them down even more, and ultimately take them out to the ocean. Doesn't sound immediately like the nicest thought. The mountains are very nice. They're sort of like I don't know, the identity of this region, but erosion is what sculpts them and shapes them, and actually their existence is a reflection of a landscape that needs steeper slopes to erode. So erosion is really like, and this is thinking beyond the human scale, long-term major significant removal of rock from the landscape is why this place looks so interesting in the first place, and it's why people, why people want to be there to interact with the surroundings. So all we saw is just one chapter in which a good bit of this transport work happened, and the river, in so doing, tried to arrange itself in a way that's going to allow it to move that material down slope in the best way possible. When you look at this landscape uh, after after the flood, it does look different. You don't have that huge open wide kind of rock floored valley, and whether or not it looked like that after the 1916 flood, hard to know. The river is said to have gotten its name Rocky Broad after that flood, and presumably that's because it looked quite different after the flood than it did beforehand. And that may be good evidence that it at least for a period of time took on that sort of treeless, shrubbless, just rocky surface over sort of the almost like the full width of the valley floor there. Going forward, what would you expect to happen? I mean, the vegetation will return, but places that received a certain amount of kind of change, restoration, realignment, whatever you want to call it, those are probably going to they're probably going to require continued attention. And the example right here, that's just upstream of where the bridge to the state park was located. That one's about as good as you're going to do in terms of in terms of trying to find a place here that needs to be adjusted to make it livable in the way that it was, but a place in which those adjustments are going to probably need ongoing attention, and are definitely going to be sort of in the line of fire, if you want to call it that, if there's another flood anywhere near this magnitude that comes down through this gorge. If you turn on LiDAR imagery in this location, it's actually pretty cool to see just what the landscape really looks like here. Huge bedrock cliffs and outcrops up here at the upper right. Those are shedding material down. That's ending up down in the channel. If we go way upstream from here, again, the river and its tributaries are crashing down over actual bedrock and pulling pieces of that bedrock out. That gets carried along as boulders. That's the source for what the river's moving. But almost certainly, these built areas here that the river did so much damage to, it's hard to imagine those being natural material. I would say that a fair amount of that is fill that has been brought in slowly but surely over the years and sort of built the land out here to make it uh, more buildable and more capable of hosting a pretty straight roadway through there. So looking at the LiDAR here, if we make a few marks, here we've got the pre the pre-Helene channel. There's kind of a little bit of an indication there of like an older channel, and that's where the river was actually, kind of moved back to or put back to. And then if we show, let's see, we'll use a really dark blue here. After the flood, it would have stretched out even further like that, something like that. So there's small changes geologically, but if you have a business there, if you're in charge of keeping the road open there, they're as big as anything going on anywhere. And that's actually a pretty good reminder of just the scale of geologic change in an event like this relative to what people have to deal with just to keep things going from day to day. And that one little river bend right there has several kind of cousins, brothers, and sisters, whatever, going up this river system. Plenty of those on the Cane, kind of like I get the railroad in the Nolichucky, which is a place that is seeing a lot of debate and controversy. The list goes on, and that's just because human interaction with river channels like this one which are sediment floored and a little bit more dynamic over time, tends to be a little bit trickier, particularly after an event like this. So it will be interesting to see what it looks like going forward. It'll be interesting to see what some of the next big rain events over the winter and spring might do to this location. And honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure anybody does, but certainly it will be watched closely, and it may be necessary to come up with some new strategies and solutions to try to keep this place sufficiently stable over a long enough period to get things going again, and maybe come up with some even longer term strategies for how to be ready for the next big event. Hope you enjoy this video, a little bit of a change from the last two field videos. I want to try to do a couple more about sort of the geologic context of what happened with the event here. Hope you check those out when I finally get around to doing them.